Welcome to the Danny Clinkscale Reasonably Irreverent podcast. Insightful and witty commentary, probing interviews, and detours from the beaten path.
Welcome to Kansas City Profiles presented by Easton Roofing. Certainly one of the most popular profiles that we've done over the couple of years plus that we've been doing our Kansas City Profiles presented by Easton Roofing was that of Bob Davis last year. We sat down with Bob for a little less than an hour and got to hear some stories and weave some tales about his long and storied broadcast career that obviously was a tremendous part of Kansas sports for, well, close to half a century, as a matter of fact. Bob Davis obviously has been a tremendous broadcaster, first in Hayes for 16 years and then on to Kansas from the time of the early 80s till his retirement a couple of years back. And now there's a new book out that not only combines the stories that Bob has to tell, but a lot of stories that other people have to tell about Bob and the games and times around Bob Davis. And it's called The Dream is Real, My Life on the Airwaves. It is written as told to Jeff Bollig, and we're going to speak with both of them today about the construction of a book, how you go about deciding to make it an as told to type of book, some stories of broadcasting as well, but mostly about this particular effort and what it brings to the reading public. It's been very popular already, just came out about a month ago, and a lot of people get it for the holidays, and that maybe this will inspire you to run out and get a copy of the book as well. It's called The Dream is Real, My Life on the Airwaves. Bob Davis with Jeff Bollig, and we'll start off with Jeff coming up next and follow up with another nice conversation with Bobby D. I'm here with Joe Spiker, owner of Easton Roofing, and boy, we had to negotiate a million things in 2020, but Easton Roofing navigated them all. As 2021 rolls out, what should we expect this coming storm season?
Well, Danny, it'll be the same thing as it is every year. The storms come, and you've got the guys out knocking on doors offering quote-unquote free inspections. Be wary as a homeowner. If somebody's knocking on your door, they probably need the work, and if they need the work that bad, they may be willing to do something untoward to get it. So if somebody knocks on your door, says they want to give you a free inspection, just tell them have a great day and give us a call. We'll come out for free and give you a good, honest opinion as to whether or not you need to do anything at all with your roof.
And what's the best way to get in touch with Easton Roofing?
You can always find us online at eastonroofing.com or give us a call at 913-257-5426.
Easton Roofing, integrity matters. I'm here with Tim Emerson, the owner of Emerson & Company. And Tim, give us an idea of the range of services that you provide from Emerson & Company.
At Emerson & Company, we do credit card processing, payroll services. We do bookkeeping, merchant accounts like point-of-sale systems.
What would you say differentiates you from other companies in the field, and what makes you special?
I think what makes us unique is that we're a small local business making regional decisions on companies. We create a profile for the business and then put it out to our different vendors in a very competitive environment and tailor those needs to the specific business, which usually ends up in a great fit or great result for the company.
And, of course, the idea is to save money, right?
Save money, and actually sometimes I'm surprised where actually a solution that may cost a little bit more ultimately does save money, but we're not conditioned to think like that sometimes.
Emerson & Company. Check them out at emerson-co.com or call them at 816-360-9092. Cinematic Visions has been an affordable solution for professional media production in Kansas City since 2003, offering award-winning video production and creation, as well as a wide array of digital and social media management services. From planning, scripting, filming, editing, and post-production, to delivering your product to a watching world, Cinematic Visions will provide professional and affordable services for you and your business with the necessary return on investment to make it all worthwhile. Cinematic Vision's goal is to unlock the power of storytelling through video and a strong online presence for your company. Beyond the numbers, they want to inspire and evoke your clients to feel and act. Let my friends at Cinematic Visions embed your brand where it belongs, in your customers' minds. You can find them online at cinematicvisions.com or with a quick phone call at 816-600-6300. Most of us have experienced auto accidents, and it's no fun. And even less fun is trying to work on the insurance aspects afterwards and getting full value after an auto accident. I'm here with David Cowan from WreckExpert.com. And David, you have an unusual and important niche for people after an auto accident.
We have a passion to teach car wreck clients what they deserve. Getting your car repaired only fixes the damage and the paint. Getting paid for your car's loss in value is called diminished value. Chances are you've never heard of this before because most people aren't looking out for you. We help people collect thousands to tens of thousands of dollars for their car's loss in value after the wreck.
And if somebody wants to come to you for that, what's the original assessment cost them?
We offer a free review of any insurance claim to see how we can help.
You can't beat that. Great expertise and assistance in getting full value after an auto accident from David Cowan. Visit wreckexpert.com and learn more.
If you'd like to join these and other great sponsors and market your business to a growing and engaged audience, contact us at danny@dannyclinkscale.com. Look forward to hearing from you.
Welcome back, and we'll start off with one of the two people involved with this book. He's sort of the driving force, as you'll hear Bob Davis talk about in our second segment. Jeff Bollig, a longtime sports I don't know what you'd call you. You've done everything in sports, Jeff. So
junkie, right?
Yeah,
junkie.
Sports junkie. That's about right. They worked in sports administration at Kansas and golf course superintendents and all kinds of great different things for you. And you'd written a couple of books previously as well, somewhat of a similar vein, but not exactly. So you've written a couple of books, now 3, but not a whole bunch. What was your idea behind this one?
Well, Danny, great to be with you. I had, grew up in Hayes listening to Bob. And I guess, as people who grew up in different areas, I know you grew up in Boston, you have announcers and you follow and introduce you to sports. Well, Bob was my Jack Buck or my Harry Carey or whomever. I listened to small college and high school sports, and Bob was on all the time. So he is the guy I kind of got introduced to sports with, along with my dad. And so I move up to Lawrence to work in the KU athletic department and then the Big 8 conference. And, my friendship and relationship with Bob continued. And I remember all but probably Bob's first or second year of broadcasting. So, it's just something I wanted to do because of Bob and the influence and impact he had on me. And he's so funny and he's such a great storyteller. I just thought it was great to kind of formalize and commemorate those experiences down on paper for others to enjoy and to see, the career of Bob Davis.
No question about that, but Bob's a pretty humble guy, and, he doesn't think he's as interesting as he is. In fact, he's about 20 times more interesting than he thinks he is. Was he in any way a tough sell?
Well, he was. I first approached him right before he retired, and he said, no, it's about the players, it's about the coaches, it's not about me. And I think more of that is he felt the story was still being told. So, we let it simmer after that. And a couple of years later, I came back and he said, nah, it's really not about me. And then I think, and this is just before the pandemic, we talked maybe in January. I said, Bob, we're going to do it. I said, it's time. You have funny stories. We're going to do it. And he said, okay. And the one thing I told him, I said, we don't necessarily have to be totally about you, but we'll use your career as the platform to tell stories of what happened at different times. So it's a little bit of history. It's a little bit of background on broadcasting. That's a little bit of bringing out personalities he was around. And it's a little bit about Bob. So it isn't totally about Bob. And I think that made it a little easier for him to accept. So finally, after arm twisting, he agreed to do it.
Yeah, you did a host of interviews with other people, but obviously Bob's the centerpiece of the book, and it's a great launching point for the rest of those particular stories. But what's it like sitting down with Bob and talk about the mechanics of an as told to book and sort of how you decide? I mean, he's got so many things to talk about. It must have been difficult to decide which ones to use.
Well, you're right, Danny, and I think maybe it's the easy way, maybe it's the lazy way. But first of all, a chronology, from start to finish is probably the easiest way to do it. But Bob's was a little different because once he started, especially when he got up to Kansas City, he was doing dual jobs. So he didn't really want to go back and forth between the two. So there's a chapter on his time at KMBZ Radio. There's a chapter on his time at the Royals. couple chapters at time with at KU because that was his longest stint. Some time, back in Hayes, getting the job, and so it was more of the chronology of this. But sitting down with Bob, and of course the pandemic's a little bit different. I went over there periodically, and we social distanced, and we spent time, but also there was time spent on the phone as well. And I will say, because I've been around Bob so much and so long, I kind of had a feel for the general flow of it. And then as I listened to Bob tell stories that I wasn't aware of and interject his humor, that helped. And then talking to other people, because I knew Bob was so humble, he was not going to give me everything. I just knew he wasn't. And so sitting down to talk with Kevin Shank, the producer, talking with Ryan Lefevre, talking with Bob Newton, the KU producer, Kevin did the Royals for a while, and talking with people he dealt with really helped me bring out stories. And then just interesting thing, talking to some of the coaches and players and media peers, I had no idea that Mitch Holtis almost worked at KOIS with Bob, but and that was kind of an interesting time. They needed another broadcaster out there because Bob, the college had gone to a Friday, Sunday, or Thursday, Saturday schedule, and they'd be on the road so much they couldn't do high school, so they were hiring a second broadcaster. And Mitch Holtis was in Pratt at the time, and it basically said, "I'll take the job," but then WIPW comes calling. So there are little things that are interesting. I just think if you're kind of a fan of Kansas as a state, of broadcasting in general, obviously KU, maybe small town Western Kansas, I think the book has a little of everything for everybody, I guess.
You talked to some really big names of the broadcast industry, too, like Jim Nantz and Dick Vitale and people like that. And, there's nobody who ever runs across Bob who doesn't like him. I mean, he's one of the few people, I say this a million times, most people who tell jokes aren't funny. Bob's funny, and he also tells a joke very funny. I mean, so, it's usually the worst thing in the world when somebody comes up to you and says, "Hey, I've got a joke for you." And you're like, "Oh boy, here we go."
Oh, and Bob's locked and loaded, isn't he? When you haven't seen him for a while, he comes up, he's got a joke for you. And, and he knows the audience well. We all know jokes that maybe are better for some audiences than another, but he's really good. And his inflection, and just the way he can tell it, he's such a good storyteller. And that's the one thing in talking with some of these broadcasters. I asked, what does, because all those guys, you listen to other broadcasters, you see what makes them good, you see what you can learn from them and such. And everyone told me is how Bob has a command of the situation, and he's in the moment, and he can make it really seem without telling the score of the game, what's happening. And same thing with Bob's jokes. He was so good at telling them. He was just, and one thing I got to see several times in high school because we did our sports banquets. He was an awesome MC. He's wonderful. If you ever want your eulogy done, you want Bob Davis doing it. I'd say he is so good. And so he's just, he's, in a sense, he's a performer. And in a humble way and in a standoffish way, Bob is really good at telling a joke, telling the story. And that's what made it fun to be around him and do the book.
One of my favorite stories is, that somebody told one time was that when Bob was on the road, so a lot of times he would have to do the morning sportscasts remotely for KMBZ because he was off with the Royals or whatever. And I can't remember the person who was in the next hotel room. I can't remember who told me the story, but Bob talks loud when he's broadcasting, and so it was like he was going to just raise the rafters and wake somebody up when he's doing the sports reports from the next hotel room.
You're right. When I worked at Kansas in the athletic department, I did have the honor to room with Bob every once in a while. And so it was great if they had the phone in the bathroom because at least he could make that his office. But you're right. And he felt so bad, but it was okay. And you got your morning sports report. And, he does just have this booming, commanding voice. I mean, it's just, that's the thing. As many people as I talked to, everybody came back to the one thing, his voice. Just so powerful. So you're right. It was interesting because he did that early, Danny. That was an early sports report. So,
absolutely.
Yeah.
You also decided that speaking with people who were a part of his life who we would never know was important, too. He was a Sunday school teacher, and you talked to a student from his Sunday school class. That's pretty cool.
Well, yeah, and I do have to tell you, I some people heard I was doing the book, and I kind of reached out on Facebook to some people just to get some feedback. And, but this one particular individual was back in Hayes, and actually a friend, and he talked about Sunday school. And you can just picture it. These three little kids are left off by their parents to go to Sunday school. And they go, and there are Bob and Linda Davis teaching Sunday school, and they start talking sports. And, it just took Bob off the focus. So they talk sports. And of course, Linda. Linda is the boss of that family, and she reined Bob back in, and then they talk sports some more. So I thought some of that stuff was kind of humanizing things a little, and also just showing just kind of the funny stuff out there, just because I think if you did a book about a person broadcasting, you get a lot of stories about games, favorite players, and to be truthful, a lot of the stuff at KU especially, there's been so much written and so much known. Mm-hmm. I just didn't want it to be a rehash of in '88 they won a national championship. In 2008 they won a national championship. I wanted to kind of tell the story or set the scene behind it. So the hijinks on the road at eating at greasy spoon restaurants, or the interactions they had, like Bob sitting down at the Meadowlands on a painted bench and his pants getting all painted, just little funny stuff that people would have a good time learning about.
How did you decide to, what length you wanted it to be, to winnow it down, to balance the fact that, Bob could tell a million stories, but you were only going to be able to tell dozens of stories?
Yeah, at some time postage gets to be too much, doesn't it, right? I mean, a little of this was timing. Our goal, when I set out about this in January, and I know, Danny, you wrote a book as well. They see you begin with the end in mind, right? So was my goal to be out by the holidays? Not necessarily. I thought if we got it out sometime during the basketball season, February or March. But then, as you know, the holidays are such a good time for interest, for sales and such. And listen, this is not, nobody writes a book for money. You know that. It's
right.
It's kind of a labor of love. And it's kind of a voice. I say, you probably don't want to do three things in life. You don't want to run a marathon. You don't want to paint your own house. And you don't want to write a book. There's too much involved. Well, you sure you've probably run a marathon. I have not, but I have painted my house and I've done a book, and they're a lot of work, as you know. But the great thing about Bob is it all just kind of flowed. And once we got started, I thought, you know what, we can get this out by the holidays. And using a self-publisher as we did, there's a certain cost to produce, and at some point you wanted the price point to be reasonable, and so that's why we kind of stopped where we did, but you could do a volume 2, as I told Bob. We can say all the stuff we forgot the first time, or something.
We can do a part 2 as well.
Right, exactly.
Yeah, you talked about the mechanics of it. How did you decide the way that you wanted to? For instance, when I did my book, we started out seeking out a publisher. We could have done it that way. It didn't, but then in the end, it didn't seem to be the best way to go. How did you decide?
Well, I'd done 2 other books, and we used publishers and a publishing agent, and then so much changed. We did the book on the history of Allen Fieldhouse with Doug Vance, the former KU assistant athletic director, and we did that in Phil's first year, right after his first year, I believe. So that was 2005, around there. And then that was the 50th anniversary of Allen Fieldhouse. And then we did the other one right during the 2008 Final Four. And so with publishers and publishing agents. And like I said, self-publishing has come so far in that time. So we decided to do self-publish because you have much more control. When you're working with a publishing agent and a publisher, they kind of dictate what you want. And we felt that we could do it how we wanted to at our pace. You're not pushed. You do it at your own pace. And so that's kind of why we decided to go that route.
You know, when I did finish my book, there was a great sense of accomplishment, and I was happy with it. Thankfully, I'll tell you one thing you don't want to try to do is do an audio book, which I did of my book, and that's the hardest work you'll ever do.
Yeah.
let me tell you that. But anyway. You must feel a great sense of satisfaction. This is your third book. It's a book done with a good friend. It's a book that you really were pushing to do, and you must feel good about it.
I do, Danny. You know, when I worked in sports information, little insight, as you know, you do media guides, which are these materials that are presented to the media to help them cover the teams. And the worst day of your life is the day the media guide comes out, because, you know, everybody is looking for an error, you know, and you know, and when you get a call from somebody like the head coach saying, my wife's name is Martha, not Sue. You know? So, fortunately, that didn't happen. But in you know, a little background, in a self-publishing book, and what you do is you get a certain number of corrections free, and then after that, you pay for each iteration. And you try to keep the budget down, obviously. I will tell you there is a typo or two that I know of, and if people can find it, that's fine. But for the most part, I'm happy that people have not come back and said, oh, my gosh, Jeff, this is wrong, or here's a huge typo. So there is a sense of relief from that standpoint. But, you know, I am very happy that it's for Bob, because he's gotten an extreme amount of feedback on it, and a lot of friends call. And that's the one thing. Most of these interviews with these other people I did, Bob did a few with me, but most of them were mine. And, you know, Bob, it's the pandemic, and, you know, Bob's 75, and so he hasn't gone out a lot. So
right.
having Tony Muser call him, having Ryan Lefevre calling him, having Bill Self call him, having the high school football coach, who's now 85 years old in Plainville, Kansas, give him a call. That was really great. And I enjoyed talking to those people as much as anybody, but them, you know, sharing those stories again with Bob. And the one thing, Danny, I think comes across is Bob's had the opportunity to lead a lot of different lives, so to speak, during his career. I guess we all have as we change jobs, but it was different in Western Kansas and Hays, because he was selling ads. He was doing high school sports. He did the college. He was really part of the community. Unlike, you know, at KU, he was doing KU, but he's also working at KBZ and doing the Royals. So he really wasn't ingrained in much as the community as he was back in Hays. And I will tell you there, and obviously I grew up there and my family's from there, the town is so proud of Bob, because he's one of them, even though he's not from there. But they are so happy for his success, because they knew they had something special for 16 years. And the fact, the books were available in the Dillon stores out there, and within 2 or 3 days, I think they were gone, you know, and so they need another order. And so it's really good to be able to kind of bring some of that out for Bob and those people who meant so much when he got his start, reacting so positively to it. So yeah, we're happy, and you know, like I said, anything from now on is gravy. I'm glad it's selling. We've covered our investment, and anything more is helpful. I do have a daughter getting married in about a year and a half, so maybe I want to push it a little harder.
There you go, and we'll talk to Bob about it coming up next. But you're here to cover the mechanics too, and I'm looking at the page on Amazon. I'm sure people can get the book in all the usual ways, right?
Right. Yeah. You know, it's online, Amazon, BarnesandNoble.com. We also have it on Dillon stores in Kansas. I'll be real quick: Lawrence, Topeka, Wichita, Hutchinson, Derby, Andover, Salina, Hutchinson, Hays. I think I got them all. There's 8 there. There's a total about 17 stores. We'll have it in Kansas City. Hopefully, there's a few outlets we're talking about now to get it out. And I think this is a book that'll have a long shelf life. I mean, maybe a year or so. You know, kind of like yours. It's a story that's, you know, kind of has a start and an end to a degree, so you can tell the story. And so we want to do some book signings and get out, but obviously, you know, COVID. So we're thinking maybe, you know, early summer potentially is getting out and doing some. And you know, Bob wants to see people so bad, you know, we all do, right? I mean, we all want to get out. You know, it's unbelievable just what this has done for our relationships. And so we can get out and do some book signings. But yeah, Amazon during the pandemic probably was the best way to do it, you know,
absolutely.
Especially if you have Prime. especially at Prime, no shipping. So great deal.
All right, there you go. Jeff, we appreciate you taking the time, and we're going to visit with Bob next, and it's been a pleasure, and congratulations on the book.
Hey, Danny, thank you very much. I appreciate it.
More of Danny's Reasonably Irreverent podcast after this.
It's time now to get some great assistance on healthcare with Chad Beisel from NoNonsenseHealthcareNinja.com. And Chad, even your business's name would indicate that you have a real aggressive way and an important way to go after some health insurance for your clients.
What I've found out in the industry is just a lot of people are really confused. They don't know what plans are good, what their plans offer, how they cover. And so I've just taken the approach of being really educated on what options are available to clients and showing them all the options that are available and making sure they understand them so they can pick and choose what options are good for them.
And one thing that's really important, of course, is access to doctors and hospitals.
Absolutely. That's becoming a big issue for a lot of people. Some of the plans out there are going to restrict those clients to where they can and cannot go. So if you live just outside the Kansas City metro, some of the counties outside, you may not be able to go to some of the hospitals up here in the Kansas City area. So making sure that you have a plan that's got doctors and hospitals and places you want to go is really, really important today.
Learn more by visiting NoNonsenseHealthcareNinja.com and let Chad help you. It's time to visit once again with Dr. Brad Woodle of Advanced Sports and Family Chiropractic and Acupuncture. And Dr. Brad, your group has reached a significant milestone in receiving a prestigious award.
Danny, we've been honored for the 10th year in a row to receive the 5-Star Service Award from Integrity Doctors. And what this means is that all of our offices throughout Kansas City have made sure to give people excellent chiropractic and acupuncture care, be on time, and do a very complete and thorough job, and have great responses back from patients.
I know firsthand because I was just treated, for instance, today by you. You have a wide range of fantastic services.
Absolutely. Chiropractic, acupuncture, physiotherapies, rehab, anything that you need to keep you well in bones, muscles, joints, and nerves.
And I can't say how much it's benefited me in the time I've coming here. Upwards of 2 years, my back has improved 100%. And you can have that same kind of treatment too. For more information and your chance for a healthier way of life, visit asfca.com/Danny today.
Hi, everybody. This is Matt Llewellyn from 23rd Street Brewery in Lawrence. I just want to thank everybody for supporting local restaurants during this time of uncertainty. 23rd Street Brewery is now open until this pandemic is over. And right now, more than anything, local restaurants need your help and support. Come on out and see us. 23rd Street Brewery is open now from 11:30 till 9 o'clock for dine-in and carry-out. Whatever we can do to help you out, maybe with your catering needs, too. I appreciate all the support, and thank you for continuing to shop local.
Firsthand, I have enjoyed the benefits of the CBD products from Canaway. My back feels better and better these days as a major part of my routine are the pain-relieving salve and the pure gold oil. And recently I had the pleasure of a treatment session using the Canaway CBD in conjunction with the Microlight 830 cold laser. The non-invasive treatment session worked wonders, and I could barely tell I was even being touched. TML 830 is the first 3B cold laser to get FDA approval, and in addition, the combination treatment with CBD is patent pending. The new smart laser is the only hands-free cold laser in the world and is used by athletic trainers, chiropractors, MDs, physical therapists, and veterinarians everywhere. You can learn more about all the great benefits from the complete line of Canaway CBD products by contacting my friend Sherry McCants at 515-208-6312. That's 515-208-6312 to get outstanding information about Canaway. If you'd like to join these and other great sponsors and market your business to a growing and engaged audience, contact us at Danny@DannyKlinkScale.com. Look forward to hearing from you. And after talking to the other man involved with the great book, The Dream is Real, My Life on the Airwaves, it's time to talk to the man himself, and that is Bob Davis, who is the focus of The Dream is Real. Of course, the call of the 2008 championship game right at the end, accompanied a little bit by Max, who couldn't keep his excitement down to a level as well.
No.
So
it was one of those moments. Where were you when that happened? Yeah.
Exactly. Well, I was there, so I didn't really hear it on the radio live.
That's right, you were.
Yeah, I was absolutely there. So let's get people updated a little bit on you, Bob. How are you feeling these days? I know you've had some health issues or so, but it seems like you're on the other side of that, maybe?
I'm feeling better. I have days where I don't move very well or whatever, but that's not the major issue here. But it's just I don't know how you figure these days out and these times and what we're doing. And, if you just call one of your best buddies and say, you want to meet for lunch today, wouldn't that cure a lot of this stuff? But I guess we can't do that for a while.
No, we can't do that for a while, but people can hunker down, and probably a lot of people got the book for the holidays, and settled down for a good book's always a way to pass the time in these days as well. I'm sure a lot of people have gotten through a lot of that. First of all, talk about the process, and we talked a little bit with Jeff about this, but the process of the book and how they came to you and how you decided the fashion in which you wanted to do it.
Well, it was Jeff's idea, and he'd been talking about it for a couple of years anyway, maybe longer than that. I've known Jeff a long time. He grew up in Hayes. He's fond of saying, I listened to you as a little kid. But he worked in media relations at KU and worked for the Big Eight. And every so often he'd say, we ought to get together on a book. He had done a couple of books, one on Fog Allen and on the Field House, and some historic things like that. But he kind of pressed the issue, and finally I said, okay, go ahead, let's do it. And it's been received, as far as I know, well around the state. Of course, I have 2 or 3 friends, and they all were excited about it. So we'll hope there's lots going on in the country right now. Hopefully we can get this thing where it belongs.
Well, you've got 2,000 or 3,000 friends probably, and that's probably a low estimate as well. And and all kinds of people who would consider you a friend, even if they've never even met you. What was it like to, people who want a full, audio aspect of Bob's life can access the podcast we did last year on Kansas City Profiles as well. But we want to talk more about the process of doing a book. First of all, how did you decide to do an as told to book?
Well, because I'm not smart enough to write it, I guess. And Jeff has done this before, but he knew the material. He lived in Lawrence and he lived in Hayes, knew a lot of the people involved, or at least had a relationship with most of them. So he was a natural guy to do it. It just kind of fell in place with him, and he worked really hard gathering information and talking to other third parties and so on. And he had access to a lot of media guides and record books and so on to gather all the details. And so I think it's been kind of a hot item around Christmas time. We finally got it to the Dillon stores and some other places where they'll have it for sale, and it's been neat to watch it and observe it. And I've heard from people that I hadn't heard from for many years, but also heard from people that I talk to frequently. So it's been good, and I have such warm feelings for both the team, the schools involved, the Division II school, and then a major college. So it's been fun for me too.
Well, no doubt you have many more stories than you could even tell in a book that was like the Encyclopedia Britannica with multiple things as well. How long did you sit down with Jeff, and how did you kind of decide maybe what you wanted to talk about?
I don't know how it just kind of happened. He said, we ought to talk about that. And we ought to talk about obviously the national championships at each schools and some of that kind of stuff. But he spent time with a little character development, the coaches, and to a lesser degree, maybe some of the former players. So it just kind of grew itself, I think. It was a story waiting to be put on paper, maybe. Maybe it's not the Declaration of Independence, but it is, in my life, pretty significant. So he had a good framework, and he wanted to do it, so that helped a lot.
When you were thinking about the times through the years, and you get to revisit that, does it sort of refresh things in your mind? Do you actually remember things that maybe you kind of put out of your head for a little bit? Are there things that...
I wouldn't want to...
Go ahead.
I'd like to say, Jeffrey, Danny, I remembered everything. It just came to me crystal clear. But no, I'm not that smart. But it's been fun, and I have tagged up with some people that were involved, and that's always good. It's just tangled up with the pandemic and everything else that's been going on, and regular family stuff. It makes it a little more difficult, but I think this will emerge, and maybe as the years go by, it'll be even more better, more More better. I said more better, didn't I? I didn't mean more better. It would be better or more.
Yep. You've really seen it all. You started, watching baseball, and you saw Mickey Mantle play and things like that. And, obviously you quickly decided that you wanted to get into the broadcasting realm. Did you ever think in your wildest dreams that, all these years later, there'd be plenty of demand for a book?
Well, I'm flattered. I'll tell you that for sure. And a lot of people have great affection for these two schools that are primarily featured in the book, and that's a big part of it. I've talked to a lot of Fort Hays people and KU people and people that were all players and so on. So they kind of grouped together, and the returns have been very flattering.
You mentioned the 2 national championship games. Why don't you reflect a little bit on each one?
Well, the Fort Hays one was my last game there, and that was a great game. 2 really good Division II teams. Wisconsin Stevens Point had Terry Porter as their star, who went on to play and coach in the NBA, and then the Fort Hays team, which had been put together by Bill Morris, who was one of the 3 coaches I worked with doing the Fort Hays games. So, the story just kind of grew. I don't think any of us knew that we were sitting on a national champion. And the KU situation, with the coaches we've had here, the 3 Hall of Fame coaches that I worked with, Larry Brown and Bill Self, of course, and Roy. That's quite an all-star lineup. So, in some respects, you'd say, well, maybe they should have won more national titles. And I suppose you could make that case, but it's hard to do it once, let alone multiple times.
When you were did you know that your game at Fort Hays was your last game?
There, yes. It was at Kemper Arena.
Right. And so you had already, had you taken the job at KU already or decided to do that?
Not at that point, no.
But you had
on the road.
Okay, but you had a sense that it may be the last game that you would do at Fort Hays. Did you know that at the time?
Well, maybe. I don't know. Thinking back, if I really sensed that, but it was certainly on my wish list if it was ever an option, and people at both places were very, very nice about that.
When you did make the move to KU, you had been obviously an iconic figure in Hays. You were there for a long time. Was there a point when you were in Hays that you really kind of thought you might be there for the duration, or were you always kind of looking around for and hoping that maybe there was something else out there for you?
Well, I don't know, looking around, but certainly I would be interested in the situation at KU, and when it became available, yeah. But it was not a desire to get out of one place and get to another. It was just things kind of fell in place, and both of them were home, really. Both of them were Kansas, and I had warm feelings about both communities and both fan bases.
You mentioned the 3 Hall of Fame coaches you've worked with at KU. Sort of compare and contrast. They're certainly 3 very different people.
Huh. Yes, they were. That's my comparison right there. But boy, were they different people. No, but they were all really good at what they did. And, Bill Morris was a new guy. He wanted to play fast, and he knew how to find players and develop them at that level. Larry, of course, was just unique basketball savant, I've always called him. And of course, Bill Self and Roy continued the good times, and both added to the legacy of KU basketball.
And what would you say was that, you're somebody who obviously speaks with these people on a daily basis when you're the announcer, and what are the kind of the differences of way they went about, not just the basketball part, but the people part?
They were all 3 very focused guys, and yet different but similar. They all had that North Carolina pedigree. Well, Bill didn't, but he was focused like that and had worked for, Eddie Sutton and some other, had been around Mr. Iba and other big-time basketball icons. So they were all uniquely qualified to do the job they did, and they were all passionate about it, I can tell you for sure.
What's the story about the size 20 quadruple E shoes that sat upon the registers at Goodwin's Sporting Goods store? Tell that. That's the kind of story you get here that people wouldn't have heard about.
Yeah. Nick Pino had his big shoes, 20 quadruple E, I think he wore, or 19 quadruple E. He was a K-State guy and a big man, I can add. But, that was just a sidebar story, as our newspaper buddies would say, but it kind of fit in with the things that were going on. One of those guys put his shoe inside the other one. So think about that for a minute.
The two people that you worked with the longest in each setting, basketball and baseball, were Max Falkenstein and Paul Splittorff, and obviously they both became great friends. Reflect a little bit on those two guys.
Well, Split was a good friend, and we had worked together on some Royals coverage before, and he wanted to do more broadcasting. He was interested in that being a second career for him, and he didn't want to just be a former player who took this job because they offered, and he wanted to be a broadcaster. And we'd spend a lot of time in the press box area at Kauffman Stadium talking about the broadcast industry and radio and television, and he gobbled it up. He was very interested in that, and I think that's one of the reasons that it went as well as it did. And Max had been broadcasting sports since not long after World War II ended. He was in the greatest generation, and he had grown up in the athletic department at KU. His dad, Earl Falkenstein, had been the business manager of the athletic department. So he grew up knowing. He even met Dr. Naismith and Paul Gallen and all those people like that. So he was about as crimson and blue as you could get.
I think it says something about each one of you that, you were kind of taking his job, sort of, kind of. I mean, he still was going to be on the broadcast, but you were going to be the play-by-play guy. Was that in any way awkward, at least at the outset?
Well, I wish he were here today to answer that question. We got along very well. We both lived in Topeka and, had similar backgrounds, although his was primarily in broadcasting. But he was very interested in the broadcast industry and had been an officer in the Kansas Association of Broadcast. And he appreciated what was going on, and I think he enjoyed being part of it. But he also recognized what his role would be this time, and I think he played it pretty well.
When you sat down to do this, did you have a sense of how much fun it would be, and did you enjoy the process of the book?
I did enjoy it, and I don't know if I use the term fun it would be, because I know it'd be a lot of work. But, bless Jeff, he really handled the heavy lifting, if you will, and was so familiar with the story at both stops that it was just almost a natural fit. And I think you'd have to ask him, but I think he enjoyed both parts of the story almost equally.
Well, Bob, it's always a pleasure getting to catch up with you, and we often in the past year have talked about perhaps getting together for lunch, and maybe in this next coming year or so we can actually make that happen, huh?
What a great idea. We'll have to do that. I would like to do that, Danny. I always enjoy talking to you.
This podcast was made possible by our great sponsors like
Easton Roofing, the presenting sponsor of Kansas City Profiles at the Danny Kling Scale Reasonably Irreverent podcast. Easton Roofing, where integrity matters.
We hope you enjoyed the latest Danny Kling Scale Reasonably Irreverent podcast. Come back soon for something fresh and new.